So important to be here. I've followed the script that Jonathan has sent me, but I also thought that I would widen the scope a little bit to share some thoughts of the architecture of climate finance, all in an aim to enable us as a region to better access. And so I wanted to provide a little bit of background as to what and where the architecture came from, where the landscape came from, and how we will be able to access. And so I'll run through very quickly these early slides and then go into a presentation, a real deep dive into the GCF and the Green Climate Fund and what is available. So this is a presentation outline that I am able to put together at very short notice. And I wanted to bring this to say that this is the background to the architecture, where the climate finance as a notion, as a knowledge base, as an event, as anything that you want to call it, came about since 1992 when we went to Rio. And the financial mechanism of the convention, and later in 2015, the Paris Agreement has taken shape in terms of many portfolios now there. The Global Environment Facility, which was created by the conference, and then later the GCF, which was conferred by the Standing Committee on Finance. A little definition, which we still are negotiating, as you know, but this is the definition that we use to be able to segment climate finance from the development finance and to also separate it as additionality, as we call it, any flow of funds towards activities, to a very simple definition, to help society to reduce greenhouse gas, which is the mitigation component, and impact of climate change, which is the adaptation component. I like this slide because it gives the complexity of the architecture. And this was put together from the Climate Policy Initiative, really the complexity. And every 2 years, CPI puts out this spider web, as we call it, to show the world what the landscape looks like. This one was produced in 2019, 2020. The one for 2021, 22 is being constructed and should be available for copper. For a region, this is where we sit. The bilateral resources, the multilateral sources, both the UNFCCC and the non-UNFCCC sources, and then we have the national and regional. And I see that there will be a presentation from Chris. So that's also. But remember that we have our own Caribbean Development Bank, which provides significant resources to the region, and also members of the borrowing countries of the IDB, which the CDB is associated with. What is the evolution of the climate finance mechanism? And I wanted to just put this slide there, that there was some first generation climate funds under the UNFCCC, and I've listed a number of them there, going all the way up to 2012. And then the second generation funds under the UNFCCC, where the Green Climate Fund came about, the Standing Committee of Finance, which is ongoing, and then this long-term program on climate finance, where the negotiation sits and which we negotiate with them. And then there are the principles which guide climate finance. It needs to be adequate, it needs to be additional, it needs to be appropriate, it needs to be equitable, and it needs to be predictable. We need to know how much money we are getting. So what is the GCF then? I'll segue very quickly into that. I like to say that really the GCF is really not a bank. And a lot of time the access modality is construed because people think that it is a bank and so that they can apply to the GCF for some grants or some loan. The GCF really is not a bank. So what is it? This was the Green Climate Fund was actually operationalized during 2011 when the governing instrument was approved, and it is administered by a 24-member board, 12 from developing countries and 12 from developed countries, serving a 3-year term. And we have people from the region, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, who sits on the board of the GCF on our behalf and advance the agenda for the region. And they are nominated and selected by the countries. And in when we went to Cancun, I think it was in 2013. So you can see that the evolution of the GCF is before the Paris Agreement. And it was in Cancun that the GCF was designated an operating entity of the financial mechanism under the convention, and to support projects, programs, policies, and any other activities in the developing countries under the thematic windows, mainly adaptation and mitigation. And very important that we don't make use enough of the readiness support that the GCF must provide, and I should have wrote, must provide readiness support. And really, this is what it is: readiness and preparatory activities to help countries to access the fund, to directly access the fund. Each member country of the convention is provided each year with $1 million in access so that they can get ready, prepare themselves to access the fund. And there is a $3 million NAP window to prepare the national adaptation plan for each country, a one-time $3 million window. The GCF operates under 6 investment criteria, very clearly articulated what you need to do, how you need to proceed to access the fund. And this is how the proposals to the fund are assessed: the impact potential, the sustainable development potential, most importantly, the country ownership. It needs to fit into the development paradigm of the country, and the efficiency and effectiveness of the proposal. And how then do we gain access to the GCF? It must, as I said, be owned by the country, and therefore the GCF itself operates from what we call the National Designated Authority. And I was happy to have served as Jamaica NDA, as we lovingly call it, for the last 6 years until I left the government service in July 2022. And this is where the first impact, as you would say, contact with the country and the GCF is made. Through the NDA, the concept, the project is developed, and the proposal is articulated. But the NDA is just the first point of contact. How then does the GCF operate? This is the architecture. And I'm gonna, the GCF operates really through accredited entity, and the IDB is there, the CDB is there, the 5 C's are there. What is this accredited entity? It is the entity that is responsible to allow the project proponents to flesh out the proposal with the support of the NDA and then submit to the GCF on behalf of the project proponents. And the GCF also has a private sector facility, which I think is important to both the private sector, but also to the CSOs that are here. There are many financial instruments that the GCF offers. And I think we sometimes only focus on the grants, but there are guarantees, there are equities, there are concessional loans that countries can. But all of it is wrapped up in the interface between the accredited entity and the NDA in the country. And it needs, as I said, to be country owned. It has to fit into the development paradigm of the country. I've put this slide here to let you see how the GCF flows have gone. And this is the most current information that came out in 2020. How many tons of CO2 has been avoided and how many beneficiaries, the split between the adaptation and the mitigation. And as you see, the mitigation still commands a larger portion. So for SIDS and developing countries, we have to step up the game because for us, adaptation becomes more important. In terms of the portfolio, and this is as at March 2021, the data for 2022 is still being compiled. And if you look at Latin America and the Caribbean, you see we are still running a little behind. And well, Eastern Europe, but you can understand why they are there. But the LAC region of which the Caribbean falls, and if we disaggregate a little bit more, the projects in LAC, you will see that the Caribbean is really, really falling behind in terms of access. Look at the amount in terms of by sector, look at the private sector itself and the public sector and how the access and how the instruments are aligned. And you can actually see how the GCF is rolling out the financing. You can see that there is a large loan portfolio as well, matching with the grants, but also that there is some amount of guarantees and the results-based payment that is aligned to the portfolio in terms of the instruments. In terms of the Caribbean, and I take it home a little bit, we have had some successes in the region. The latest one is the Barbados Water Project, which was approved at the last board meeting just 2 weeks ago, which was put forward by the 5 Cs. And then we, as I said, we have what is called the issue of the private sector facility, which I think will become more and more important to the private sector as the transformation takes place. 6 projects approved in the region, 3 for adaptation, and then we have about 76,000 beneficiaries in the region benefiting from the GCF. And I've put there some of the funding some of the projects that are approved, which I think, and I hope the presentation will be shared in the interest of time. So I'll run through a little bit to see what is in the pipeline and how we are going to support total access